Attention. We're about to get started with today's event. Good afternoon to you all, and thank you all very much for coming to our annual policy debate hosted by the UC Riverside School of Public Policy. My name is Rafael Barrientos Posada, and I am the Dean's Brand Ambassador for the UCR School of Public Policy, and I'm honored to serve as MC and moderator for today's event. Today's debate topic revolves around the question: should California step in to fight against NIMBYism and homelessness? Despite California's wealth as one of the richest per capita states in the world, homelessness remains a significant issue. Efforts to address homelessness through public housing, work programs, and shelters have faced resistance from Not In My Backyard or NIMBY actors, who oppose having such programs in their neighborhoods due to concerns about property values and safety. Local city councils often ignore laws combating homelessness to prioritize re-election, including the California Housing Accountability Act, which limits local government's ability to restrict new housing development. This has sparked debates about the state's role in addressing homelessness and its impact on federalism. Today's debate centers on whether anti-NIMBY measures are worth the potential disruption of the balance between local and state powers, and if they will effectively reduce homelessness. During the first hour of this debate, 4 UCR students will present arguments on opposing sides of the topic. Following the debate, we will have a brief audience Q&A for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. We are privileged to have 3 distinguished guest judges who are board officers for the Civil Rights Institute of Inland Southern California. Our first judge, Ken Gutierrez, was the planning director for the city of Riverside from 2003 to 2011 when he retired. During his almost 30-year tenure with the city of Riverside, he was responsible for a number of planning projects, including award-winning Magnolia Market Corridor Study and the innovative Downtown Specific Plan. Please join me in welcoming him. Next up is Neil Okazaki, the Senior Deputy City Attorney and Constitutional Policing Advisor of the City of Corona. As a litigator, he has extensive experience representing clients in the state and federal trials and appellate proceedings in diverse areas, including civil rights, employment law, disability law, and personal injury. He has tried 18 jury trials and completed 12 binding arbitrations in his nearly 25 years of experience as an attorney, primarily in the Riverside County area. Please welcome me and joining him. And last but not least, we have Ms. Lana Wilson, who is a seasoned nonprofit professional with 2 decades of documented success in nonprofit governance and fundraising. She is a CEO of Lana Wilson Consulting LLC, providing strategic guidance to nonprofits focused on strengthening governance, fund development, and organizational sustainability. Prior to establishing her consultancy, Ms. Wilson held a variety of positions in the nonprofit sector, including program manager, fundraising professional, and executive director. She has built programs from the ground up, raised millions in charitable dollars, and led systemic changes resulting in stronger, more efficient, and more diverse nonprofits. Please join me in welcoming her. Guest judges, we are truly honored by your presence and thank you for being with us today. At the conclusion of the debate, our guest judges will provide remarks and their majority vote will determine which side has prevailed. Now, without further ado, let's introduce our student debaters. On the affirmative side, we have first speaker Liam Burley and our second speaker, Nadia Colon. Liam, Nadia, please approach the stage. Liam is a first-year public policy student. He was a part of the Model United Nations in high school and was awarded outstanding performance for a mock U.S. Senate gathering. He wants to go to pursue a BA, MPP, and then law school, and focus on corporate law and enter the political world. Please join me in welcoming them. Then we will have the negative side come up. Nadia Colon, we will have, sorry about that. And then Nadia is a 4th-year psychology major and a senator for the College of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences. During her time at the Associated Students of UCR, which is our university's second student government body, She has worked as a Senate intern, as a member of the Safety Committee, and as vice chair of this Campus Safety Alliance. She has helped reinstate the Campus Safety Escort Service. She seeks to pursue a career in law and advocate for educational justice. Please welcome me and join in inviting her. Next up, the negative side. We have our first speaker, Miriam Fidel, and our second speaker, Naya Pizarro. Miriam, Naya, please approach the stage. Miriam is a fourth-year public policy student and has been successfully operating her business Cobra LLC since March of 2020. She is the founder of the organization Our Way, which facilitates the UC readmission process for reentry students. She plans to pursue a Master in Public Policy upon graduation. Naya is a third-year public policy student and the elected senator for the School of Public Policy. She's conducted research with Professor Kim Dion on COVID in Malawi. She has served on several committees, including Student Health Advocacy, Basic Needs, Legislative Review Committee, and Academic Policy to represent both the school and the greater campus community. Beyond campus involvement, Naya has worked on several local and congressional campaigns and is excited to continue and learn about the political sector. She also seeks to go to law school in the near future. Please join me in welcoming all our debaters. Debaters, please take your seats. Now, on to our debate. Our timekeeper, Matthew DeHaro, will be keeping track of time for everyone. He will notify us at 2 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, 10 seconds, as well as when your time is up. The affirmative side will go first to present their argument. Liam, you have 4 minutes. The floor is now yours. Liam, whenever you're ready, just make sure to turn on the mic. Whenever you're ready, time will begin on your first word.
The federal government recently estimated that nearly 3% rise in homelessness nationwide this year was driven mostly by California. And despite this, homelessness has been the #1 concern of Californians for years now. And it's because of this quote that my partner and I agree, and we affirm that the resolution resolved. The California state government should interfere with local communities to fight against NIMBY and homelessness. If we can prove that the benefits of our argument outweigh the harms, then we will win this debate. And now, to give clarification, NIMBY stands for Not in My Backyard, and in this case relates to the people's intolerability for affordable housing, shelter, or group homes, specifically built in lower income families or for homeless people. We believe that the government should interfere with local communities to fight against homelessness and NIMBY because systemic issues that are the root cause of homelessness, housing challenges, and NIMBY's ignorance of not providing alternatives for solving the homelessness issue in California. Systemic issues provide important examples of why the local government needs to step in and correct and fight against homelessness and NIMBY. And the two major examples are intertwined in each other, consisting of redlining and racial imbalances of the homelessness community. To give further clarification, redlining originates from government maps that were outlined in red to showcase where Black residents lived and were therefore deemed dangerous investments for housing. And in these redline neighborhoods, the government had refused to give loans. And according to the 2020 US Census, about 6.5% of Californians identified as Black or African American, but they account for nearly 40% of the homeless population. And since redline areas had an overwhelmingly Black majority in California, it proves that redlining still has lasting devastating effects on the Black community. Now, it proves this because that only 6.5% of Californians identify as African Americans. Redline areas had much higher proportions of African Americans, and 40% of the homeless population are African Americans. It is obvious that redlining still has a part to play in contributing to the African Americans, Californians being homeless. And the problem regarding racial imbalances is an important factor to consider, not just because it is an economic issue, it has now become a racial imbalance. The state government must intervene with homelessness because it is them who instigated redlining. It should be up to them to correct their wrong. NIMBY, not in my backyard, often resists the establishment of homeless shelters or affordable housing in certain neighborhoods. And while proponents of NIMBY may argue for various reasons, such as property values or safety concerns, the reality is that this mindset fails to offer viable alternatives for homeless individuals. By resisting the development of shelters or housing options, NIMBY advocates advertently perpetuate the problem of homelessness without offering constructive solutions. Homeless people are left without adequate support or resources, forced to endure harsh living conditions on the streets or in temporary shelters, and that are often overcrowded and underfunded. And instead of simply opposing initiatives that could provide essential aid to those in need, communities should work together to find compassionate and sustainable solutions to living conditions. Not only does NIMBY not provide any alternatives, but when towns or cities propose ideas, NIMBY kills the bills. And according to San Francisco planning, San Francisco was due to triple the amount of housing in their city because of sky-high rents displacing many families. However, NIMBY has been stalemating this process of new homes being built. In summary, addressing systemic issues, overcoming local government interaction, and countering NIMBY attitudes are crucial steps in effectively combating homelessness and promoting equity and justice, addressing these challenges, and assure that all individuals have access to safe and dignified living conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. And now on to the negation case. The negative side will go next to present their argument. Miriam, you have 4 minutes. The floor is now yours.
Thanks, Rafael.
And of course, yeah. And time begins on your first word.
Thanks. So in California's severe housing crisis, over 151,000 individuals face the homelessness situation, exacerbated by NIMBY's opposition. Recognizing this complex issue, my partner and I negate the resolution. Resolved, the California state government should work together with local communities to fight against NIMBY and homelessness. We assert that the drawbacks of state intervention surpass its benefits. NIMBY is defined as opposition to local development perceived negatively, while autonomy symbolizes the self-determination of local communities and their development and policies. Local solutions over state interference, local communities are better positioned to lead the fight against NIMBYism, not the state. Local institutions, including city councils, congressional districts, and assembly representatives are better suited to address issues directly impacting their constituents. Their role is to serve as individualized needs to their communities, whereas the state has a more overarching role. Supporting this study, such as highlighted by the Kresge Foundation, show that community-driven solutions are more effective and sustainable in addressing local issues, like housing and homelessness. This approach ensures that solutions are customized to meet specific community needs, fostering local support and successful implementation. The overarching issue at hand here is where fiscal and government support should be strengthened, local or state. Addressing issues locally is addressing issues at their root. By streamlining solutions as they affect communities, issues will be more attainable to respond to. When overcoming strategic barriers, local is the optimal option. State intervention is a last resort. State intervention is necessary when funding and support is not allocated for local institutions. Second main contention. Furthermore, the question at hand is, where should the state intervene? While my partner and I are not agreeing with NIMBYism, we are objecting to the intervention that would violate the foundation of rights to autonomy, which ultimately should be our priority in implementing solutions to homelessness. We are not objecting to homelessness. We are not objecting to the homelessness intervention. We are objecting to the state overstepping autonomy. If local communities have more support, the state would not have to resort to intervention strategies. We need to look at the root cause of tension, which is a lack of support and collaboration. State interventions worsen NIMBY attitudes. State interventions often intensify NIMBY sentiments, undermining community collaboration. This is illustrated by the negative consequences seen in top-down housing projects, where local resistance and community divides deepen, as evidenced by the success of community-driven projects like Niche, Guam, and Cape Town, which improved living conditions significantly through local collaboration and empowerment. A priority of this project is including groups who are often excluded from local government conversations. Intercommunication between institutions and external communities is not only crucial, but should be the utmost priority of innovation practices. Thank you.
Thank you, engagement. Appreciate that. Now, at this point, I will give the first speakers approximately 3 minutes to engage in a period of crossfire to ask each other questions. Liam, you may take the stage. And whoever would like the first question to ask. Time starts on your first word.
You stated that the local California governments have more mobility in aiding local homelessness. Why do you think that?
Sorry, thank you for that question, Liam. I actually have a question for you in return, though. How do you justify NIMBY's approach in light of the broader community, such as affordable housing and public transportation?
The state government will further be able to aid the affordability of houses and transportation because they have greater resources to fund these resources rather than the local city governments because they don't have sufficient resources to aid.
What measures would you suggest to ensure that local opposition does not hinder the development of necessary infrastructure and social services?
The issue with local opposition is people's unwillingness to help their fellow community. So the state government will institute more housing abilities for homelessness and keeping them more interconnected with the community. So I think further, like deepening the root and connection with homelessness within the community will help provide understanding and accountability within the community. But going back to my previous first question, why do you think that the local governments will be able to aid homelessness better than the state government will because of insufficient funds?
Thanks, Liam. Can you provide examples where NIMBY outreach have led to positive outcomes for the wider community and not just for the immediate neighborhood?
NIMBYism, I'm sorry, can you restate the question?
Yeah, of course. Can you provide examples where NIMBY attitudes have led to positive outcomes for the wider community and not just for the immediate neighborhood?
I don't believe that NIMBYism has provided any benefits for the community. I think that NIMBYism is a deep issue within the community that should be fixed. But referring back to my first question, why do you think that the local governments have the ability to further aid the community with the community needing homelessness more than the state government does?
Absolutely. So they'll have more autonomy when they're, dealing with it locally. But going back to my first question, can you please provide an example?
An example of what? Can you remember what your first question was?
Yeah, when NIMBY had a positive outcome.
I don't believe that NIMBY has positive outcomes.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you, first speakers. At this time, we will move to the affirmation side's rebuttal speech. This will give the affirmation side's opportunity to refute the opposing side. Naya, if you would please take the stage.
Thank you, guys. Let me just adjust this.
Actually,
I can't adjust it? Oh.
Sorry, I confused you. It's actually not even.
Oh.
Okay, I'll be back.
Those both names are very similar. I get mixed up a bit. So.
Testing. Okay.
Now we have you, Nadia. You now have 4 minutes. Time starts on your first word.
Now, if the California Housing Accountability Act was to limit the amount of housing being built without government interference, then the local city council will need to build more housing for homeless to address the homeless problem. The lack of an alternative will result in the continued growth of homeless population if the local city councils are unwilling to build shelters. The pandemic led to an unprecedented surge in job loss, causing millions to become unemployed. Nevertheless, a significant number of individuals who were unable to secure employment during the pandemic experienced homelessness. In the year 2023, it was estimated that a total of 653,000 individuals were experiencing homelessness. Now, as of 2024, the state of California possesses the highest amount of homelessness population in the country, totaling approximately 123,000 unhoused homeless populations. Now, given that the highest amount of homelessness is in California, the homelessness issue is far more significant than what proponents may think. And the issue will not be solved unless there is intervention, as the opposite side has said, that it should not be intervened unless there is a very severe emergency. And on February 6th, San Diego recently announced they do not have enough space, beds, or homes to house the hospital patients that are homeless. Now, these barriers to housing also means that with the severity of storms, the homeless populations have to be relocated from the shelters. In addition to landslides and floods, California is prone to heat waves, and by allowing the homeless population to sleep on the streets, they are in danger of heat stroke. Now, by exclusively targeting landlords and motel owners at a local level, NIMBY fails to address the broader issue of homelessness. NIMBY asks those in housing what to do about populations without housing. But they fail to realize that there is not enough space for affordable housing at an affordable price. Now, according to the East Bay Times, landowners in California have challenged the Supreme Court to limit the rent control laws. NIMBY advocates prevent the public lands being used to house the populations, so the city struggles to find places to house the population. Now, the shortage of housing accessible in California cannot be addressed on a local level. NIMBY fails to realize that landowners who are on NIMBY sites will only prioritize high rent to keep the neighborhoods more exclusive. Like, for example, in Los Angeles, NIMBYs have battled to stop the construction of a high-rise that will block views. They prioritize lofty views from the window in order to keep the housing market more exclusive than even building more housing people that don't have a home. Now, as part of the opposition, the government should not intervene. Nevertheless, NIMBY fails to acknowledge that their concerns about the proximity of homelessness shelters do not address the alternative solutions to combat homelessness. NIMBY advocates insist on the relocation of the homeless away from the neighborhoods, yet we'd like to offer a viable alternative. If they do not want to be housed here, then where do you want to house them if you will not provide an alternative? Now, the New York Times, they also mentioned that more than 500,000 acres of public lands in California are inaccessible to the public, and 45% of that land in California is owned by the federal government. Now, considering there is a housing shortage, why should the government not intervene if we have housing that can be used for people that do not have housing? NIMBY only continues to interfere each time they want to build more housing, therefore creating an even bigger problem where populations cannot afford the price of the rent, and there are no other options than the areas that they are currently living in. Now, if NIMBY does not ever provide an alternative, they only keep relocating homeless people until there are no other place for them to be housed. So it needs to become there is currently a stalemate where there needs to be agreement between both local and government level, or both sides are able to find a place to house homeless people, considering the homeless shelters are so overcrowded. Now, if NIMBY keeps knocking down.
Thank you, Nadia. Now we will move on to the negative side's rebuttal speech. This will be the negative side's opportunity to refute the opposing side. Naya?
Thank you.
You will have approximately 4 minutes, and time starts on your first word.
All right, let me just adjust this. All right. So first to begin, it is crucial to address the repercussions of the state of California intervening due to its hindrance of local communities progress. So the first thing that I want to mention is that we are not objecting to intervention of homelessness. That is not something that we're here to do today. Instead, we're rather providing an alternative, which is we believe that local communities and local government should have the opportunity to intervene before the state has to do that. So state mandates fail to address the root social and economic issues driving the failures of state-driven housing policies to effectively tackle the underlying causes of homelessness and community resistance are well documented. The necessity for grassroots initiatives and local stakeholder engagement over top-line solutions is crucial, as seen in community-driven success stories like the Machine Well Project, which demonstrated the power of local action in creating sustainable change. Community-based health and social service organizations, because of their accessibility and range of available services, are often preferred sites for health and social needs addressed by homeless individuals. Given the complexities of the often chronic social health problems facing these impacted by houselessness, strong evidence is needed of why and how programs focus, engage, retain, and successfully reduce the mental health and substance use problems of the marginalized population.
This is important to consider because these
Are the issues that we need to address. And the question is, who will address these issues? Is it the state or is it the local government who are able to interact with their localized constituents and be able to address their individualized needs? So ultimately, localized solutions should be the priority. It is so crucial for local communities to have the power in decision making that impacts the quality of life. Antagonizing those impacted by homelessness is not the solution. Rhetoric utilized by NIMBY that antagonizes solutions only disrupts this progress. Local communities are ultimately the first point of contact, and they should be the ones who are involved in the solution. So, continuing, we've argued for local solutions over ineffective state mandates, highlighting that community-driven approaches supported by examples and research from organizations like the Carnegie Foundation, which did a study where they showed that by involving the local community and the women in this community, that they were able to have more productive conversations to promote change. And ultimately, for my conclusion, NIMBYism is ultimately a distraction from the issue at hand. The issue at hand is intervention. NIMBYism, this population is made up of concerned constituents who are utilizing their voice to promote their opinions. However, they are not a part of, or they are currently not a part of the solution. In fact, they are negating the solution. So today we are negating that the state should intervene, but we are not negating that local government should have the ability to intervene. Thank you.
Thank you, Naya. At this point, I will now give the second speakers 3 minutes to engage in a period of crossfire to ask each other questions. So, second speaker, Nadia, yeah, take this.
Okay.
Awesome. Now, you have 3 minutes to speak. Time begins on your first word.
Okay.
Okay, so you already agreed that NIMBY does not address the issue, but in one scenario in Huntington Beach 2019, NIMBY stopped plans to build 13,000 new homes over the next 8 years. Now the issue at hand here is that while NIMBY is a problem, why do the locals actually agree with NIMBY when they keep hindering progress?
That's a good question, and that's something that we discussed as well. And we're not negating that they're a hindrance to progress. In fact, we're saying that by realizing, by pushing more resources for the local government, this will only encourage more constituents to see the benefits of implementing more solutions. So currently, we do see a lot of pushback, and especially there was one case I saw in the LA Times that demonstrated, I believe it was a community in Irvine, where there was a huge protest of NIMBYs who did not want to implement, I believe it was converting the Motel 6 into a homeless shelter and housing, and there were so many people who showed up that did not want that. So the solution to that is by including these individuals in these conversations to ultimately get to it before you see this pushback. And by having these conversations, I mean, there'll only lead to more increased progress. So my question is, you mentioned the pandemic and how homelessness rates increased. So how do you think that local government could have assisted during that time?
What the local government should have done is actually provide housing for the people that were homeless, because at the time, unfortunately, the whole populations had no place to go because they could not afford the rent. So as a last resort, they actually moved into the Mojave Desert. Now, this is actually a hazard because one, they're at risk of heat stroke and starvation and dehydration. So the bigger issue is that why hadn't the local the local areas actually intervene by actually making the areas accessible to the homeless population instead of actually pushing them out to such a severe degree that they felt the need to move into the desert.
Thank you. And then my next question is, it seems that we do agree that NIMBYism overall act as a hindrance to progress. How would you address that?
Well, considering that most of the land in California is unused, considering we have about 45% of it is actually not used and actually owned by the federal government, we could actually use the land because at this point we are in a state of emergency, considering that one, the homeless shelters are being overcrowded, there's not enough space for people to live in them. So at a local level, the only option would be to actually to house them in the unused apartments and buildings. Now, the bigger issue here is that the unused houses are actually being sold to people that are homeless. So rather than actually housing people that could live there, they're instead giving them off to people that are more interested in keeping the areas exclusive. So the bigger, why I wish for this would actually be to get approval from the federal government to use the unused land, and this would actually provide more housing alternatives if local areas do not agree.
At this time, we will move on to the affirmation side's summary speech. This will be the affirmation side's opportunity to summarize their case. And Liam, you may please take the stage. Liam, you have approximately 3 minutes. Time begins on your first word.
In conclusion, tackling systemic problems, addressing housing issues, and challenging NIMBY attitudes by integrating homeless individuals are vital actions in the fight against homelessness. Along with the advancement of fairness and equality in communities, it is imperative for government intervention to play a central role in addressing these hurdles and guaranteeing that everyone can enjoy secure and dignified living standards. Our opponents believe that the California state government shouldn't intervene with homelessness because they believe that local California state governments have better roots to the community. However, they do fail to acknowledge that there are insufficient funds for addressing these issues. The local government may have better roots within the community, and I do partially agree with this. However, even though they have roots, the federal government of California still has greater funds, and it doesn't really, people may care about the roots and etc., but if they don't have the funds and the mobility to aid the homelessness, there's not going to be much help. There's not going to be more houses for homelessness to live in. They're not going to be able to overwrite the legislation of the CHAA, the California Housing Accountability Act, and limiting these housing. The federal government of California has these means of policy changes that are imperative to the aid of homeless communities. Our reasons for why California state government should interfere with the homeless crisis and NIMBY's neglectful attitudes will help destroy systemic issues with minimal conflicts towards the community, make housing affordable to lower-class Californians, and bypass the unwillingness of NIMBY attitudes targeted towards homeless Californians. I yield the rest of my time.
At this time, we will now move on to the negative side summary speech. This will be the negative side's opportunity to summarize their case. Miriam, if you'd please take the stage.
Thank you, Raphael. Naya and I want to re-emphasize
the long-term benefits of local autonomy and the risks associated with state-imposed solutions. Respecting community voices and fostering local initiatives lead to more equitable and effective solutions to NIMBYism and homelessness, avoiding the pitfalls of state intervention. This approach is supported by the tangible successes of community-driven projects and the backing of housing equity research, demonstrating a more constructive and inclusive way forward. Additional response: local governments possess the ability to utilize land access. Local governments control land access and zoning regulations. Critics may say that unifying local representatives such as city councils, country boards, can serve as an obstacle. Prioritizing efforts towards unifying these internal institutions would serve to benefit intervention practices rather than imposing a state figurehead. Thank you.
Debaters, at this point, I will now give all speakers 3 minutes to engage in a period of grand crossfire to ask each other questions. If you could all turn on your microphones, please. Are they on?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Like the first question, time starts on your first word.
All right, so I'd like to take the first question. I apologize for that. But so my first question is, you mentioned the insufficient funds and how that was something that we didn't consider. Can you elaborate on that? Because I believe that the insufficient funds is actually reason more so for local government to be given more autonomy and to be given more funds.
So the local state governments do not have the resources for funding homelessness and housing issues, but the federal government has much more. The California federal government does have much more resources to aiding this stuff, to aiding homelessness. So, do you think that the state governments or the local California governments have more funding to aid?
I don't think they have more funding, but that's precisely why I think they should get more funding. And I think that the argument today is, should California ultimately have more autonomy? By instead of distracting this conversation by giving them more power, we should be giving the power back to the community and giving them more power and more resources. Because I agree, they don't have as much funding as they should. And if they did, I think that would be a better step in the right direction. And it could also help mitigate the issue of NIMBYism, as it could include them in the conversation. Because I think overstepping with the state, it doesn't exactly address their concerns either. So that could only exacerbate this issue.
So I do agree that local governments should be able to have more funding, but I feel like we're stepping away from the main argument. It's who should do it, the California state government or the local communities. And that's not saying, oh, this person should have more funding or this person should have more funding. In reality, the state government does have more funding and more mobility to aid these issues.
Thanks, Liam. However, immediate action, while it might be crucial, hastily implement state solutions can lead to long-term problems such as increased NIMBYism and community resistance. What do you and Nadia say to that?
Well, the main reason why people went homeless during the pandemic was because they couldn't afford the rent. So the issue here is that on a local level, they should not be agreeing with NIMBY. Because the trouble is that NIMBY interferes to such a degree that the local communities cannot find a way to stop them. Because what happens is that when the local community, they wanted to build 13,000 homes, NIMBY stepped in and stopped that from happening. So instead of doing that, the local community should have got together and disagree with NIMBY instead of allowing that to happen.
If I may ask you a question, how would local governments combat NIMBYism?
So I think that combating NIMBYism, it would be including them in these conversations for homelessness intervention. So it's not exactly working against them. I think we need to work with them and include them in these conversations, because at the end of the day, their advocacy for their beliefs is hindering the progress of intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, debaters. That is time for grand crossfire. So move on to the affirmative final focus. This will allow debaters to give their concluding remarks, or first speaker. Affirmation side, you have 2 minutes to give your concluding remarks. Nadia? You have approximately 2 minutes. Time begins on your first word.
Okay. It is an ethical issue as to whether the price of a house in the neighborhood is more important than finding housing people who currently have no house. The pandemic created job loss and created job effect in which millions face financial stability, access to food and housing. Now, resisting houses being built on public lands fails to provide a place for people who are homeless a place to go. Overcrowded homeless shelters means that homeless population are given no other option than the streets. Now, the issue is that many activists don't want the homeless population to move into public land and prevent the local communities from finding a solution. The local communities, rather than allowing them to overstep the boundaries, should actually be resisting the need themselves. When they wanted to build 13,000 homes, what the local community should have done is should have stopped the need from integrating and stopping that from happening. Because as a result, the landowners are not going to be open to lowering the price of rent, and housing tenants, if they cannot pay for the rent prices, and in turn become homeless. It becomes a cycle in which homelessness is actually instigated by the by supervisors they cannot afford. And as a result, they end up on the street, but then when they are in search of finding the housing, they cannot find it because there is no space available for the price, and the houses are not allowed to be built because of the being interfered. I need your time.
Now on to the negative final focus. This will allow the negative to give their concluding remarks. Naya, you have 2 minutes. Time begins on your first word.
That was not my first word. Alright. So overall, the overarching issue at hand is local versus state. We ask ourselves the question, how can we best implement change? Is it through enforcing all-encompassing policies that disregard communities' individualistic needs? Myself and my partner believe that to achieve progress towards reducing the rates of homelessness and providing improved quality of life for constituents is by addressing this issue ultimately locally. It can be agreed upon that the current policies and interventions in place prove to impose many shortcomings. The solution to this is not by removing autonomy of local government practices. In fact, this will hinder that progress. NIMBYs argue for autonomy. Their concerns may be rooted in opposing intervention. However, imposing state interventions will not remove this ultimately. In fact, this will exacerbate the issue as it does not address the root concern at hand. The root concern at hand is making sure that we are in constant communication with our communities and addressing their needs as it is fit. We must prioritize constituents through means of advocacy for basic needs, support, community support, and mental health support. Protecting our constituents should be the priority of our local government. And by providing deliveries upon solutions that work to support those at risk of homelessness, California will move forward in the right direction. Ultimately, I want to leave with a question. How can it be expected for a state institution to understand the localized needs of constituents? Thank you.
And now, please allow me to thank these students for a great debate. Now, from here on, we are going to transition into a period of audience Q&A. You may pose your questions to either side. If anyone in the in-person audience has any questions, please kindly come up to the middle aisle and speak into the mic so the Zoom audience can hear you clearly. And for those in the Zoom webinar audience, please go ahead and input your questions via the Q&A feature, and my fellow Dean's Ambassador, Pia Prashant, will raise her hand and pose your question to the debaters. If anyone would like to step to the mic and ask a question. Yeah.
I actually have a question for the negative side. So would you consider homelessness to be a statewide issue or a local issue? Because you're arguing that local governments should invoke a plan to solve homelessness, but that would kind of go against the idea that it's a statewide issue, which is what I consider it to be.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. No, that's a really good question. And actually, I kind of have two answers. So I think if it is a statewide issue, it is also a local issue, and therefore the solution should be local. So I feel that homelessness, it's affecting all of America, and it's especially affecting California. But I do think that the solutions, especially right now, as we're seeing that there's not much intervention being done effectively, that we need to start locally and give more power to these local communities.
Next question.
Everybody, I have a question for the affirmative side. If the issue were to be put in the hands of the state, how would the state make sure that they don't overstep and actually harm local communities?
You know, what would need to happen would be that the local community and state government would actually need to interact. Now, the big issue here is actually trying to prevent NIMBY from stopping local community from preventing houses being built. So what the local community needs to do is to actually be able to build the houses without having NIMBY stop each time.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm short. So. Hi, so my name is Hong. I want to ask these questions for both sides, two sides. So from what I heard so far is that we kind of have like a funding system. There's an issue with how the funding is allocated, especially in local sides. As the positive side, as points out, we have a lot of like redlining district, and because I'm interested in how funding is allocated for education, and I noticed that a lot of funding is allocated through what's it called? Area tax or places tax, where like if that area has like property tax, yeah. So if that area is richer, you're more likely to have more funding. So I feel like this is more like a system-wide issue rather than just like local versus government. So I think if you guys were to address like homelessness issue, you guys need to address like how funding should be allocated, because especially during the red light district, no, not red light district, but like those like community where property taxes is low, it's unlikely that the funding will allocate to local government to have more power to solve homelessness. I don't think it's likely to be solved if like the issue of allocating funds can be resolved.
Yeah, so if I could start the response to that, that's like precisely why the state government should have more control and intervention, because the local communities where homelessness is like maybe most prevalent is in these lower red line communities, as I said before. So if these communities already have low budgets, the local governments, how will they be able to fund? You're gonna need the aid of California state government to further even out the expenses spent on the homelessness. If they're already like, if this local governments don't have much funding, then how are they gonna aid the homelessness communities?
All right, so no, that's a really good point, and kind of addressing it in like, okay, so I first want to address the funding aspect. So when we were doing our research, I actually did come across an article that kind of discussed about how it's difficult for communities to get more funding. And that's precisely why we kind of wanted to go towards the local view, and by empowering the local communities, by pushing them towards those resources and the resources that are available, we believe that that would help push towards reducing the homelessness rate, and especially helping by pushing more basic needs and more advocacy efforts in that sense. And yeah, do you have anything to add as well?
I just want to agree with my partner. I do think that by empowering the local communities to take a stance with things that are going on and not wait for the state to intervene or rely on state federal funding, we can better take control of what's going on and better be our own advocates. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all responses. Actually.
So we have a question from the Zoom webinar, an anonymous attendee. How will both local and state governments be held accountable to provide the necessary resources for the homeless population?
Okay, I can take it first. So the question was, how will they be held accountable? So I think kind of utilizing like a checks and balance system, and kind of, I think that I feel that the point of this debate is to kind of show how crucial it is for local communities to be included. But I do think at the end of the day, they are still a part of California. So by us saying that California shouldn't intervene, we're not saying that California shouldn't work alongside these local communities. They ultimately still serve that role. And I think that communication between both is extremely important, and that would be very crucial.
To answer that question, the big issue here is that actually the states are actually able to be more transparent than the federal government. So considering states are more transparent, they should be more transparent with their funding and where the funding is going to. Because I believe only 6% of the funding actually is going into housing. So considering this, that they actually can tell the public how much support they actually do need. And if that is the issue, then why aren't they broadcasting it on a local level?
There's time for one more.
We have one more question from this webinar from an anonymous attendee. For both sides, Who has the right to affordable housing? Does it matter if you paid taxes in the past, or do individuals from homeless shelters automatically qualify for such amenities?
I can start. So personally, I really believe that we all have a right to affordable housing, and housing should not be a privilege. I think really and truly what it comes down to, regardless of state or local intervention, is that homelessness is an exacerbated consequence of other issues, right? So, financial insecurity, food insecurity. So I really think that everybody has the right to affordable housing, regardless of whether or not you've previously been a taxpayer or you just started into that system.
Yeah, going off of that, I do agree that everyone should have the right to affordable housing. The issue is that when there is no housing to be available, how are we supposed to help people go off the street when there's no other place for them to be housed? Because NIMBY and people that want to keep their communities more exclusive would rather not see a high-rise being built to block their view. It becomes an ethical issue as to whether you're more concerned about the view out your window than somebody living on the street. So everyone should have access to housing, but the trouble is not everyone agrees with this, and local community needs to not allow NIMBY to overstep the boundaries, prevent them from building housing.
Go ahead with one other question. For the state side, just to make it clear, to ask my question, what was your response towards how they mentioned that the state had a better source of funding instead of local?
Sorry. Okay, so your question is about how they have a better source of funding, right? Okay, so we agree that the state has more funding, but that's precisely the issue that we're kind of trying to touch on, and that local government should be given more funding or reallocation. And like we did mention some projects where we were able to kind of see that in practice, and how utilizing community principles can help push that. And by showing that there's like a need and a want, and overall pushing for advocacy for that support, we believe that there could be a push in that sense.
What are the local principles that you just mentioned?
So like the local community principles. So we're in that sense, we're kind of talking about just like utilizing, or no, by including everyone in the conversation, and by like upholding those kind of values. So like the integrity of the community, and by bringing in everyone and making sure that every person, regardless if they're a part of a marginalized community or a marginalized voice, that they're able to advocate for themselves and say what they need and be able to be provided for.
Sort of a question towards that. Like rising taxes and like rising rent, I believe the people of the community would like rather keep their funds to themselves instead of help. And I know an example from my city back in the Bay Area. It's Millbrae, but they had recently had a problem just like this. But instead, the community protested towards it instead of funding or bringing the homeless community, giving them housing, because they claim they don't want them to stay. So I believe that is like a common response from the community. But do you have any responses to that?
Yeah, no, and that's kind of an issue that I kind of mentioned in the LA Times article that I was reading, where that's a big pushback that we're seeing. But I do think that a root cause of that is by not including them in the conversations before they implement these policy changes, and that especially if we're seeing this trend of so much pushback, I think that it's more crucial now than ever to make sure that everyone is able to kind of participate before they implement this. Because ultimately we want these housing interventions to be implemented, but it's not going to progress if people who are like NIMBY actors continue to kind of push. So I think what's important is responding to them, and that's kind of one of the steps we need to take.
Okay, we'll allow for one more question.
I'll do this for both actually, because one thing I noticed when it comes to a lot of homeless issues with homeless people, there's one thing where there's a lot of communities that try and incite violence towards a lot of homeless people, and especially there's some stories of people trying to tear down a lot of tents. So there's people who actually try and murder a lot of homeless people. So my question would be what kind of actions would you guys take towards a lot of the communities that are very anti-homeless or try to incite violence towards homeless people.
So I think a critical action is educating, right? So educating the community on why homelessness exists, what can be done about it, and I think being very transparent with the community and having their voice be a critical part of that conversation.
I think a big issue is that a lot of the people that live in the communities are actually very much in fear of urbanization, because they fear this so much. Because they fear this so much, they have in fact filed a lawsuit against it, and that was one of the big issues. That even by educating people, there are always going to be people that are living in wealthy neighborhoods that would have more power because of the amount of money they do have, and then they push out the people in the communities because of the power they have. So the issue is that one, homeless populations have a big issue with their own personal safety because many other people may try to hurt them. So the difference is that if they were to be built a home that's actually more covered rather than living in a tent, then that actually would solve a lot of these problems. But the issue is that a lot of people are preventing them from finding a place to live.
Those are all the questions. We thank you.
Very much for your questions. I know there was a lot on Zoom, but thank you. Now, we will move on to the final segment of this event. And I'm so honored to bring up our distinguished guest judges to give remarks, pick the winner of tonight's debate, and provide feedback to our student debaters. We will give each of our judges 2 minutes each to pick their winner. The majority vote will determine the winner of tonight's debate. First up, I would like to ask our first judge, former City Riverside Planning Director Ken Gutierrez, to give remarks. Thank you.
Why did I ever agree to do this? And I say that for 2 reasons. One, both teams did a remarkable job. The second reason is I spent a career defending local governments and the local control, yet I have also fought with city councils about not doing the right thing because of NIMBYism. And I sit, and watch the dozens of bills the state has passed because of the failure for cities to provide enough housing. And now you're going to give me nightmares. I retired, so I didn't have to think about these things. Like I said, both sides did a great job. Affirmative side, I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about success of state programs. How state can do it better than cities. I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about how the state could help the cities. And maybe a little bit of the history the city's history of failure to provide the housing. Negative side, I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about the struggles you've had in providing the housing. If the state were to work with you better, how could you have done a better job in providing that housing? All that said, if I have to vote, I'm going to vote on the negative side. I think you did a better job in a couple of ways. You identified the idea of the state needing to work with the cities, the state having money, but not necessarily sharing the money. And how could they allocate the money? It's not, well, it is a matter of how much money, but it's also a matter of distribution of those funds. And you made a good argument of how the state is not doing a good job of distributing those funds. And as you said, empowering the local communities. You made a good job of arguing that the cities are better suited. You know your communities better. And I think you made the argument well about how state mandates have not yielded the results that you've wanted. The cities, but at the same time, the cities haven't yielded the results either. So it's it becomes a difficult thing. But I think you did a little bit better job of identifying successes at a local level. So I could go on for a long time, but there's my vote. So good job to both sides.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gutierrez. Next up is Senior Deputy City Attorney and Constitutional Policing Advisor for the City of Corona, Neil Okazaki.
Well, thank you and good evening. Thank you for having me here today. And what a wonderful program this was. I commend all of you for a very, very lively discussion. I wrote down the time 5:48 on my paper, and that was the time that I started to have a sense of which way I was going to go. Up until that point, I was literally, every time somebody got up to speak, changing my opinion in favor of whoever spoke last. I'm trying to keep in mind that you're college students, and as one who roamed the campus far more many years before, which I don't want to think about, I added it up while I was sitting there, and I'm not going to say it now, but I would not have been in a position to do what you did tonight. So I want to congratulate all of you, and I am glad that the future generation of Highlanders is far better than my class. I like Ken, work for Ken did. I worked for a city. I used to work with Ken actually, and much like him, have argued for local control, even going all the way to the California Supreme Court to argue that states, not necessarily in the context of homelessness, but should be careful about intruding upon local authority. And that's a decision in the homeless context that the United States Supreme Court will be taking up this year in the Grants Pass case. My little lawyering input here. So you are all on the cutting edge of something I think important. I also think all of you have expressed your own commitment to finding solutions to this problem. It's just a matter of which solution is better. And I appreciate from a public policy perspective, no one's here to say this is an issue we don't need to deal with. You're all saying this is an issue that we need to deal with. It's just a question of how best to deal with it. So that came through your conversations, and I certainly appreciate your commitment to housing. Ultimately, it's not for me to tell you what I think, but to sort of make a decision in terms of which arguments I thought were best presented here today. Any of you want some personal feedback in terms of how you presented, and you really want to hear it from a lawyer, you can come talk to me afterward. I do think that the negative side did talk about ultimately this being a local control issue. In hearing those discussions, it was discussed about how there were many shortcomings, but that state intervention won't work. That there's a public housing and public health issue and needs for that. What I wasn't necessarily convinced of is if currently there is a lot of local involvement, I wasn't convinced that state intervention for an existing problem might not help be part of the solution. And then hearing about the availability of public land, that there was efforts to block local solutions that resulted in housing short or unavailability. And particularly persuasive to me was the idea people in the Mojave Desert argument, I think, was particularly strong. And it does seem to me that if everybody was saying that there was a housing crisis, and that NIMBY means that it's not in our backyard, the argument I heard today was if every city were to essentially say that something's not going to be in our backyard, then we literally are going to just be moving a population of those experiencing homelessness to an area in which services may not be available. So for that reason, and while it may not be entirely consistent with my own personal beliefs, as one who works with the city, I gave today's presentation by a very, very slim margin to the pro side.
Thank you, Mr. Okazaki. And finally, we have Ms. Lana Wilson, CEO of Lana Wilson Consulting LLC, for the final remarks. Thank you.
I did not want to be a tiebreaker. Thanks, Leo. Thank you again for having all of us. It's been fantastic. All of you wonderful students did a great job. I commend you for everything that all the work you did, all the research you had to do in preparation for today's debate. I echo the comments of my colleague Ken and my colleague Neil. I think you all did a fantastic job, but somebody has to be on top, right? So I appreciate on the affirmative side how you set your arguments with a historic foundation, with a look back at some of the root issues that have been perpetuated over time, starting out with redlining and the ongoing impacts of that that we see today. I really appreciated how you said the state started this. The state should take a strong role in fixing the problem. I also appreciated how you were able to give very specific examples about how NIMBY has disrupted very real local efforts to build housing, and how NIMBY has turned those upside down and prevented local governments from doing what they have tried to do. I will take a personal aside and share that I am here locally in the city of Riverside. I serve on the city's planning commission. And part of that job is to approve consider how new housing developments and all sorts of other developments in our city. And just about every single time there's an affordable housing project that's proposed, my NIMBY neighbors come out in full force and often disrupt. And so when you were very clear with some good examples about how local efforts are disrupted, often preventing local governments' good efforts to try to build housing, that really resonated with me. On the negative side, I think you ladies did a fantastic job as well. I really do appreciate, as somebody that is involved in local government, not as an elected official, but as a local community servant and advocate, I appreciated your arguments about the benefits of local autonomy. However, I noticed that there was a failure to acknowledge the fact that local autonomy has kind of been what's gotten us into the situation that we're in right now. I don't believe that you gave enough good examples of local efforts around our state. I would have loved to have heard some examples of local governments that have done exactly what you were arguing, Naya, in terms of bringing communities together and hearing all of the voices. Show me some of those examples about how local governments have been able to do this successfully, and I might have been a little bit more convinced. So with that, tiebreaker, drum roll, I want to give my vote to the affirmative side.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Thank you so much to Mr. Ken Gutierrez, Mr. Neil Okazaki, and Ms. Lana Wilson once more for serving as our distinguished guest judges today, and congratulations to the affirmative for winning today's debate. Thank you all for coming. Our sincerest, well, now we have for today's event, basically. And our sincerest thanks again to our special guests from the Civil Rights Institute of Inland, Southern California, for making the time out of their very busy schedules to be with us this Thursday evening. And thank you as well to our student debaters, Liam Burley, Nadia Colon, Miriam Fidel, and Naya Pizarro for being here and working throughout their cases, being here. Now, thank you also to Dean's Ambassadors, Colin Donahue, Pia Prashant, for planning today's event alongside the Director of External Engagement, Mark Mandeling, and Chief Ambassador, Rayon Kalam. We hope you'll join us at our next event this coming Monday, March 4th at 3:30 p.m. when Samuel Roberts, Public Communications Officer for the San Diego Association of Governments, will give a talk as part of the Alumni Spotlight Series. Then on March 7th, we will have a Student Spotlight Series featuring 2 public policy students speaking about modern international conflicts. I will be speaking about drug cartels in Mexico, and Joseph Anastasio will be speaking about the College Democrats of America, will be speaking on the state of refugees in Afghanistan. Then on Saturday, March 16th, we invite you to participate in a donation drive where we will assemble care packages for the homeless in partnership with Path of Life Ministries. We will welcome volunteers to help us. You can learn more about the UCR School of Public Policy events like these by visiting our website, spp.ucr.edu. While you're there, you can also learn about the Master Public Policy program as well as our BA MPP program. But before that, I'd actually like to have Joe actually make some special remarks about today's event.
Thank you so much, Raphael. And one more round of applause for Raphael, our MC. Just a note to all of the attendees today, please be on the lookout for an email from the School of Public Policy regarding today's raffle. The winner will just get an email directly with their virtual gift card. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Joe. We do like to spice things up with a couple games and raffles just to keep it entertaining. But thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. We have some boba in the back. Please help yourselves. We're so glad you could be with us this evening. We look forward to seeing you in the future at other UCR School of Public Policy events.